Welcome to the final day of Rebooting the Music Mainframe. It's a free online music symposium that we've put together with our friends at Byta, the platform for sending digital audio and streams. Before we start, I'd love to thank our funders, Factor, the Government of Canada and Canada's private radio broadcasters, and the Canada Council for the Arts. I'd also like to thank everyone who's joined us over the past week. We've had over 500 registrants, which has really blown our minds. We had no real expectations for how well this thing would do, but I think it's exceeded them. And yeah, before we start, I do want to say too, because this is the final day of our symposium, I just want to plug our last panel, which is tonight at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. The panel is, I think, pretty appropriate way to end it. It's a panel called Enacting Change. And basically over the last week, we've looked at various ways the landscape, the ecosystem, and the music industry has changed with digital technologies in particular. And we're going to talk about some strategies, some hurdles to enacting thoughtful change as we adapt to the new realities. So please do join in if you got time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time tonight. I'd also like to encourage everyone to use the chat to submit questions. I'll be monitoring it throughout. And we'll try and get as many of them answers as possible. So I guess we can kind of get started on this one. And before we jump into everyone who's far more experienced and smarter at this topic than I am, I thought I would kind of talk about why we came on this topic as one we wanted to explore. And for me, one of the things that's always been interesting is I think of a time when a platform like MySpace was the platform for independent musicians. Everyone uploaded their music to that platform. It's where you discovered bands. It's where you could book bands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then inevitably, MySpace kind of fell by the wayside. And beyond just like the transition to new social media platforms, there was a huge amount of music that was lost, like literally lost forever if the musicians themselves didn't keep copies or upload them in other places. And I was fascinated by that idea of like what happens to that kind of music. And currently we live in a world where a lot of bands exist on SoundCloud and Spotify and nowhere else. And how can we ensure that we don't have that same loss of music? Or alternately, is it okay if we have that same kind of loss of music? That's kind of how we came to this topic. And I'm really excited to dive into it, like I said, with far smarter people than myself. And one thing I do want to say right off the bat is it's not going to be all heady conversations. We're going to dive into some practical suggestions too for musicians watching on best practices, tips on how you yourself can archive, preserve your music. So that's kind of my little bit. I feel like at this point, I should turn it over to everyone else to introduce themselves. Let us know who you are, how your work relates to archiving and preserving music or art, and just tell us a little bit about yourselves. Do you want to go first, maybe, Jessica?
Sure, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us to talk about preservation today. So I'm Jessica Thompson. I'm an audio mastering and restoration engineer. I work on new music. I work on a lot of reissues, which is my entree into preservation. Preservation through reissues is a huge thing. And then I also, I'm kind of the setup person. When someone calls me up and says I have a bunch of tapes in my closet or my basement, I'm the person that goes over and says, all right, let's see what you got. Let's figure it out. Let's make a plan. Let's make an inventory. And let's get this stuff digitized so at least it can be preserved at that level. And then I would hand off to someone like Nori for long-term archiving and preservation. See how I did that? Just handed right over to you.
All right, I'll take it. So yeah, my name is Nori Guthrie. I am an archivist down here in Houston, Texas, at Rice University. And I work with not only music, but I have started something called the Houston Folk Music Archive and the Houston Blues Museum Archive. And so I have worked a lot with people, older people who have now decided to preserve their artistic output. And I will throw it over.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Hessel van Oorschot. I'm from the Netherlands. the co-founder of a music platform called Tribe of Noise, but we also acquired Free Music Archive in 2019. So we are looking at everything from using archives and actually asking independent musicians or composers or lyricists to actually look at the material from the old days, revamp, remix, re-record, and have fun with it.
Yeah, and as you can see, we've got folks who are experts in personal archiving, like historical archives, digital archives. Hopefully, we're going to talk about how they all are different, how they interact, etc. So hopefully, we cover our bases. But I figured before we do that, it probably makes sense to start with the I don't know, the most obvious question, and maybe Nori, you can start with this. But like, what is an archive?
So if you want to think about your kind of archival items that you might have or you might have produced, obviously that would be your music. But then it also could be things like photographs or images taken at your show, flyers that you created to promote, posters, set lists, just a variety of things that in a sense help to tell the story of yourself as a musician.
Yeah. And Hessel, like in the digital sphere, would you add to that?
Yeah, well, the challenge now for I think every independent musician is that if you create a beautiful song or a composition, or you write some lyrics, if I talk to musicians and we represent over 50,000 of them, didn't speak to all of them, of course, but when you speak to them, what you hear back is that when they finish the recording, they go like, "Ha, I'm done." So they forget about metadata. They forget about, I want to distribute my content to as many people, but looking at the small print, or can I actually remix something that is in the public domain? And those sound like boring questions, but if you put like a few minutes of time in that, just to rethink about the content that you are using from other people, or the content that you actually want to archive on your own hard drive, or put on a digital space like SoundCloud or Bandcamp or Free Music Archive or any of the other ones out there. If you put a few minutes more time in making sure that it is findable, that will actually make a hell of a sense for not just for fans and friends and hopefully maybe in the future a couple of people who want to find your song because they want that song for an advertisement or maybe a documentary or a home video, but it also makes sense for people who curate content, that they if they want to build a new catalog or a mini archive of all the music that relates to the Mount Everest, or all the music relates to summer holidays, that they can actually use the internet and all the data that you added to your content to make a better archive or a better collection.
Yeah, and I'll just guilty as a musician who has uploaded my music and then immediately forgotten about all the important steps that come next, and then had to go back through my own emails and upload processes to figure out which one was the final master, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyone at home who's feeling guilty about that, I do too. We're going to get better. You touched on a lot of this, but I think we should really dig down into the question of like, why should, both from a personal perspective, but I guess from a institutional perspective, like, why do we archive work creatively, financially, like business wise? What is the importance of archiving work?
I mean, I think they can be defined in a variety of ways. So if you want to think it from, there's one way where you are fitting into the current history of what is happening now, and people in the future are going to be interested in that, whether they like your music or they think that what you're writing about is interesting, or where you played was interesting. All those kinds of things help to kind of place you in a historical context, which when you're in the thick of it, you may not think about it, but in the future, it might actually be something that's important. And so that is one way that an institution can think of that. So we have plenty of stuff from people who are well-known, who are not, And but it's still, they're like giving a little taste of what was popular at the time.
And Jessica, as someone who does the work and works with reissues, like you probably have a different view on that too, or an additional perspective on that.
Well, I think the value of a particular recording can fluctuate over time, and there are records out there that did not make a big splash and were largely forgotten when they came out, and maybe it just wasn't their time. But later on, they're rediscovered, and in a new context, they can become such beloved artifacts of a different time and place. So while understanding that we're not going to save everything, nor should we attempt to save everything or preserve everything, having worked in the reissue world for so many years, I have seen again and again the way an artifact from years past can take on a new value culturally and then often, monetarily by retelling the story and taking those recordings and putting them out there into the world again.
Yeah. And Hessel, my understanding is you're kind of our resident expert on how you can ensure that you're preserving your work in a way that it can be reused in that way. Like you're crediting the work, you're making sure your metadata is up to date, et cetera. Do you want to speak to that a little bit on the importance of that?
Yeah, just to give you two short examples. One example is you have a global licensing framework that everybody knows, like photographers and musicians and book authors. It's called Creative Commons, and Creative Commons is a framework because if I make something like a song or create something, by law it's mine. I own the copyright. Great, but now I actually want some form of to add some form of intention so that people understand how they can reuse it, because I can post it to the internet, of course. And then people think like, hey, great, I see this recording and it's free of charge, or, in the US, you talk about royalty free. In Europe, we get confused about that term, just to give you an example. So you want that data in there where you just ask the musician, like, what can other people do with your content? Like, what was your intent? What is your intent? Because somewhere down the line, after many years, it becomes public domain again. Copyright expires in some cases, after 70 years after the composer died. In other cases, I think it's Mexico, after 100 years. But somewhere down the line, it's just back in the public domain. And then in that meantime, you want to know what you can and cannot do with that content. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's super important. The other quick example is that we did a contest couple of years ago, was a remix contest where we did all the homework and went into the archives, like the ones that Nori is working for, and we found beautiful compositions in the public domain, and we just handed that over to musicians that said, like, go wild, this is a song from 150 years old, re-record this, work with the lyrics. And we instantly made mistakes ourselves because we took a composition that was clearly public domain, because the composer was dead for like 200 million years, but the lyrics were re-recorded somewhere or like rewritten somewhere in the 60s or 70s. So we had to take the old lyrics and not the ones from the 60s. We messed up big time. So musicians went into the studio, recorded the whole thing. They were happy, like, hey, we have this new recording and we can, under an open license, like, give this back to the world and people can enjoy it and build upon our content. And then, we had to go back to the artist and say, like, sorry, but those lyrics that you just sang into your microphone, those were the wrong ones. Can you just go back into the studio and use the old ones? So in some cases, it's really nerdy, and you really have to dive into some details. But I think the basics, like, who are you? Why are you afraid to just write your name to where it says composer, that you just write your name if you are the composer, or the performing artist, or if you used to play on a Gibson guitar, whatever, write it in there. Maybe Gibson in 5 years' time will do a contest, and they want to do a reverse lookup on all the songs out there that were actually with performing artists on the Gibson guitar, and they love you for entering that metadata. Just go for it. So that's a couple of examples where we see how actually it's super inspiring to do that extra bit of work.
And you bring up something that, sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Some of this is related to the blurred lines between being a professional career musician or artist and a hobbyist. And this largely speaks to the way the music industry has changed over the past 20, 30, 40 years. Decades ago, if you wanted to make a record, you had to go to a studio. And very frequently, you had to work with a label. So there was a structure, a corporate structure in place to make the music, to distribute the music, and then to preserve the music, often in, you know, a physical storage facility of some sort. Well, nowadays, anyone can make a record. I can make a record on my laptop. I have a song for you by the end of this panel. But all of that other labor, preserving my own work, inputting the metadata, figuring out distribution, figuring out what's my master file and what's a mix file and all that, that all falls on the individual these days. I mean, not always people still are working with labels, but like all of you who are making records as an independent musician, you have to take on all the roles. You're your own preservationist, you're your own metadata specialist, and not all of us are well versed in the skill set required to do that well. So that's part of why we're here today. We get to give you some tips and tricks and resources for figuring out how to track that information.
And actually, that segue is perfect, because one of the questions I wanted to ask is a thing that I carry around, and I'm sure people who are watching at home struggle with, is like, as a musician, just this whole conversation, there's a barrier to entry of convincing yourself that your work is worth preserving in any way. So I was wondering if each of you could kind of speak to, like, not necessarily a pep talk, but if you want to pep talk, that'd be great. But just your own perspectives on your domains and how you would respond to someone and encourage them to preserve their work and why they would do that.
There are people out there who do care or who will care in the future. You know, I could think of countless times where people want live performances from a certain artist or from a certain venue because they want to put together a documentary, that kind of thing. So you just don't know how people might want to use your materials in the future. And then also you might want to, you know, you might never know how your materials might end up someplace else. So an example would be, I was digitizing a lot of things, and one was for like a band named Schlongweasel. And the person who was in Schlongweasel got super excited because there was this recording of their band that was done by a radio station. And so you just, you also don't know how your stuff, you know, could delight you in the future. So taking that time, at least for your own personal things, is important.
And hopefully all the extra materials that Schlongweasel has preserved, like the posters, the flyers, the t-shirts.
I don't know what else they did, but I will say that I was able to make somebody happy, and that was great. So
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I know that the Free Music Archive, they had a lot of recordings from WFMU in the States. So people going into the recording studios and doing their own thing. And they had a unique experience in the recording studio, because it's not every day that as an independent artist or even as a hobbyist, you get invited to radio station to actually play live and broadcast that content. So a lot of that content is on freemusicarchive.org. And for me, that's like, you know, a big treasure to just browse and go through that. And luckily, the people behind Free Music Archive in the beginning curated a lot of content. So there's a lot of information about the day, if it was snowing or what people were wearing, or there's a picture in there of the actual recording in this. So that's a lot of fun. And so that's, you know, just go berserk. There can't be enough metadata in there, and if there is enough metadata in there, we will tell you, but not the other way around. Just you know, do whatever you can. And then to your remark about saying like people feeling that their content isn't good enough to be preserved. When we started Tribe of Noise in 2008, I actually needed an MP3 file to do testing, like on an IT level, to test the systems, the workflows, like if I upload something here, does it break, what happens? So I'm not a musician, but I created something behind my computer, uploaded that file, did all these metadata fields because I had to test it. And then years down the line, I see my music popping up in YouTube videos of people on road movies with my music, which isn't actually music, but it was my first attempt to just upload an MP3 to the system we were building. So it always has a purpose from people who just your friends and fans who will just love you for whatever you do, even if you're smashing guitars, they will love you for it. Yeah, all the way to people who by accident stumble upon you, but that by accident will increase if you have proper metadata online that people can search for.
Which I think it's important that we talk about this too. Like I think of that same kind of like, whether it's, people are interested in a scene or a venue, and so they stumble upon new music or new art or new songwriters or whatever, or it's through the metadata. Like I think of in the past, I used to buy records, and if there was a guest artist on one of my favorite bands, I would immediately go see like what are their bands and then buy their records and etc. And I think that there's an interesting conversation. I know Jessica's spoken to me about this, but we keep talking about how important metadata is for preserving and archiving, but I think we had a little conversation before this about like the cultural devaluation of metadata and how that can be seen on streaming platforms. So I was wondering if you could kind of bring us a little clarity on that, Jessica.
Sure. So I teach mastering to college kids. I would teach a mastering class. And one of the first things I always do is say like, hey, like what record are you really vibing with right now? I'll get a lot of different answers. And then I'll say, who mastered it? No idea. Oh, well, who recorded it? Who mixed it? No idea. Can you name any of the musicians other than the main artist? Sometimes, right? Well, this is important stuff because these are the creators that are doing the work that fascinates us and that makes us want to listen more. But there are so many holes in the pipeline from the moment of creation where the people in the studio are responsible for writing down, this person mixed it, this was the assistant mix engineer, this person played bass, this person played guitar, keeping track of all that, and then passing it along to the distributors when you upload your music for distribution. Sometimes that happens. Then where does it go? You log on to a streaming service. Do you actually get to see who made the record? Some streaming services give you some credits, but I'll tell you, I looked up my Discogs the other day, and it is probably single-digit percentage of the records I have worked on are listed on Discogs. And that's tough for me because my credits are my calling card. That's how I get work. So I drill this into my students right at the very beginning of the semester. You should care about who made the record. And when you make a record, you should keep track of everything and make sure that information goes through the pipeline. Last little tidbit on this. One thing I absolutely love, and I'm seeing this more and more, on social media, my peers who do the kind of work I do will post a happy release date when someone puts out a song, and they will say, guitar by this person, mixed by this person, mastered by this person, and tag everyone. And it's a very grassroots way of celebrating all of the personnel that contribute to making a record. That's where I think you find a little nugget of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another one where, like, how many times have people I know got work through one of those tags? Like, I love the way this record sounds. Who produced it? Oh, no one. Who engineered it? Oh, that's why it sounds the way it did. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to bring up. I guess that there's a large question that we should answer or attempt to answer, which is, we've talked about like why a person should archive their own work, but in a larger context, like who decides what is worth preserving, and I guess also like how it is preserved. Like there is kind of an overarching question of who is gatekeeping, or is there gatekeeping? What is determined to be valuable, what is not? And I know with everyone coming from very different practices in the preservation world, like I'd love to hear what each of you have to say on that. Nori, did you want to start maybe?
Yeah, I can start. So if an artist gives us their work, or a recording studio, I've been going through a recording studio's work lately, and they donate it to us, then we work on trying to get it digitized. Now, not all institutions are going to spend that money, because different institutions have different amounts of money, but we're a private university and we're doing okay. And so we get that stuff digitized, and then we try our best to describe it. And that description, really ranges depending on the things that I've been given. If I'm given something that is just like, I don't know, I was looking at one that said rock one today. So then I had to listen to it, and I don't really know who's singing, but I can try to like do a little bit of description. I think it was some weird radio play thing. And I don't know what, it was kind of confusing, but that's as much as I could provide. And so other times I have a lot more information. It doesn't mean that I put down everything, but I might like person who is people who are performing, if I know that, and then names of songs, venue, date, because I can't spend too much time because I got to go through a lot of things. And so we will digitize it all, and I'm not going to make like judgments on what is good and what is bad. I have not listened to some really awesome things in the last couple of days, but that's all right. It is preserved. And so, but other places might make more selective decisions. So I think it depends on the institution. And if you're in a future space where you're thinking about donating your materials, that is a conversation that you have with the institution. Like, what are you going to do? Here are my expectations. Can you meet my expectations? And then hopefully that place will then communicate with you honestly. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but generally they should, and say what they can realistically do. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like even just giving that context that you live in a world where like preserving everything, or not everything, we can't preserve everything, but preserving as much as you can is the job, or what you're trying to do. And then the question, I guess, comes in of like, who goes in there, how do they go in there and choose what gets pulled out to, for example, like Jessica, you work with a lot of reissues. Like maybe you have some thoughts on that process of like going back and how we decide what in hindsight was important or deserves a spotlight again.
One thing I love about the reissue world is that it's filled with gatekeepers, but it's the kind of gatekeepers you want. And in that respect, I want to give a shout out to the gatekeepers, because there are something like 60,000 tracks uploaded to the streaming services every day. I don't want to dig through 60,000 songs. I want someone to tell me, here are a handful of songs or artists that you'll probably really like. And there are enough cultural gatekeepers and reissue labels out there that, I feel like I have some good folks I can look to for guidance around that. And within the reissue world, you get people who are so dedicated to doing the labor of the crate digging and listening to 100 hours of recordings to curate something that tells a story and that feels coherent and that sounds good. There is such value in that process. So that's my shout out to curators and to gatekeepers and to the folks who do the labor of sorting through hours and hours and hours of archival stuff and then pulling out the gems to share with us.
And maybe that's a question for Hessel too, of like, is there a way that musicians can make that job easier, like for someone else to tell the story?
Sure. I mean, they can do a lot themselves these days. There are many platforms that, and I realize that they can't guarantee to save or to archive all your material for the upcoming 100 years. I mean, that there are a few institutes who are promising that, but like in general, even if you go to commercial entities like SoundCloud or Bandcamp or whatever, it's there and you have an account. And if you no longer have the account, they will close your personal archive down. So that's for the archiving. What you can do as a musician is think about the tooling already available. Just a quick example. If I look on Free Music Archive, for example, we try to work with as many open standards as possible. So I know, for example, that in the music world, you work as a composer, you work with a number that's called ISWC. And that number you can get if you're part of a performing rights organization, but or like a publishing company, which means that they have to do it for you. And it can take up a bit of time before that composition gets that unique identifier. And then still the publishing company and everybody else has to use that and properly like enter that metadata. That doesn't seem to work that well for the average musician of today. But there are a couple of like open standards where you can generate your own data sets, post them to a publicly available repository, make copies to, you have Wikidata, you have the Internet Archive, you have, there are all these other places who would love to have a copy of what you just did. And then at least there's a copy saved, which I still love on Internet Archive to go back in with the Wayback Machine and to just look at all these websites from 20 years ago and see, all the silly things that we thought was important then. But that's a way that you can start doing it yourself now. Like, use some open standards that are thrown at you on the platforms. If you want to work with commercial entities, good for you, but just realize that they're not in this game to archive your material for the upcoming 200 years. So choose partners or copy paste the content to places where you think, like Internet Archive or Wikidata or Wikimedia or some of the other open places. Copy that material so that at least you have multiple copies over the internet. If data is linked well in the end, if that's the end game, then machines will figure out to take 20% of your relevant data from your commercial facilitator, 20% from the Internet Archive, and maybe 30% for somewhere else. And then it, brings back that information together and says, like, this is the artist, and this is all the information that we couldn't find on the internet. But you have a role to play, and that's how you can help curators and people who are actually making beautiful playlists or helping you on that front page of a platform as curated content for Valentine's Day or for whatever. Yeah.
There's an interesting link put up in the chat, and I won't, everyone can kind of click that on their own, but it does bring up this idea of permanence, and I think that's probably something the wheels are turning at home on, like, what is an archive? How long will it last? How long should I expect my music to last, etc. And I was wondering if everyone could just kind of chime in on your own worlds, like the streaming platforms. No one can predict how long Spotify will be around. But in general, are we talking, you upload stuff digitally to a variety of platforms? Is that good for like 10 years? Is that good for 25 years? The Free Music Archive, the Internet Archive, is that longer? And then the physical archives, like, are we talking eternity? Are we talking hundreds of years? What are we looking at for preservation? Maybe Nori, do you want to start? Yeah.
I guess I have to say one thing is that, like, if you're relying on your digital output to somehow like live at these different places and that's all you're going to do, I don't think that's a good decision. I know it's not that they're not important, of course, to put your music out there, but I wouldn't be reliant on that. I mean, I think you need to think about creating your own personal archive, what you could be doing, thinking about hard drives, not keeping them too long, investing in them, having a couple, updating them with new content, thinking about like folder structure, I know that none of this stuff is sexy. It's just not sexy. But maybe for some of you it is. But like, if you have all these different versions of the same song, do you need to keep all those versions? Is it going to just muddy the waters later on? What kind of file names could you create that aren't too long, but that are specific enough for you to be able to find what you need in the future? Might also think about spreadsheets, and not just like a Google sheet, okay? Because I mean, yeah, Google is really great and I use Google Sheets all the time, but that's not, I can't guarantee in 10 years that Google is not gonna be like, we're done with Sheets. We don't wanna use docs anymore. And so, you might wanna just invest some, use some Excel spreadsheets or CSV files and record information that's important for, maybe you're working on just like one song. What's the info that you might want to retain for the future that you might end up forgetting? So just as much as you can remember, which will then you can use that info later on when you're uploading to different platforms. And then you don't have to rely on that information being in that platform, which could disappear. You have it yourself. So, and then also physical, I will say the physical does last a long time if you have it in the right conditions. And so I kind of like physical, but digital is fine too. You just, there are some things maybe online to look at of how to preserve your files longer and not have, not lose that data over time. I'll be quiet now.
I was going to throw some tips your way. Because
yeah, sure.
The mastering engineer, last person in the music production chain, it often falls to me to do this work. I was trying to drop a link, but the Grammy website is doing some migrating right now, so the link didn't work, but it will soon. The producers and engineers wing of the Recording Academy has technical documents that are super valuable and easy to follow and have suggestions around folder hierarchies, what to name your folders, and file naming conventions. Really simple stuff to follow. You figure out the way that works for you, and then you do so consistently. But what I have done with my work, and then I always recommend to other folks, is figure out the folders that you need to keep the stuff that you create when you're making music. And then make a little hierarchy of empty folders labeled 96K 24-bit masters, 96K 24-bit final mixes. This is my favorite folder. X, do not use. Or sometimes I call it X holding zone. It's where you park stuff, or parking lot, where you park stuff. You've got those blank folders on the root level of your work drive. Every time you have a new project, every time you make a new song, copy, paste, all the folders are there waiting for you to put your stuff in it. So then, like when you have the place, you will keep the stuff in the right place, and you won't have a hard drive with 45 files called audio 01, audio 02. So that's like a really basic way to just develop a practice, a daily practice of labeling your stuff properly and parking it in the right spot. And I think someone just dropped the link. So yes, that PDF, super helpful. I teach it to my students. I follow it. Once you get going, it just becomes part of your day. So
I'll pipe in to say too, I'm going to save the chat. And so any links that have been dropped in here, when we do upload these videos at a later date, I'll make sure that they're included in the description, the metadata of some kind. We'll preserve the chat and the important info.
Yeah.
Hessel, like we've kind of segued into like all this great practical advice. We got the physical archive, we've got the folder naming. Why don't you hit us with some of your best practices, tips and tricks for preserving digitally?
Yeah, well, one of the things that worries me, and maybe that's something that Jessica and Nori can actually answer better, is if you work, and I saw it also in the chat, if you're working with your station at home, you're composing music, and you're using commercial software to do so, then there is a file format that comes out of it, with raw material, but with everything in there. a lot of people upload, in the end, just upload an MP3. I think the world is lucky to have an organization overlooking MP3, so I don't think it's going to disappear quickly. But I have a lot of conversations with people in the archive business who says, like, which standard to use now, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. So I wonder if Jessica and Nori can actually comment on that. Like, what would be? I know that Nori, that you like physical stuff, but if it becomes digital, like, is there a format that you think like, well, this is something for the upcoming 10, 20 years we can actually guarantee to be in the archives and kept in there?
Wave. That's
Wave?
what we use. That's our master, is a 96.1 Wave. And so that's what we do. We send out a lot of, we might have big old reels or a large cassette digitization job or something, and we will send that out to a company. I guess I could give them a shout out. The Media Preserve is the one that we like to use. And they send it back. We give them the specs that we want, and they send it back to us, and we keep a wave. We keep what we consider an access MP3. So if someone in the future wants to listen to that material, we don't share the wave unless they're doing some kind of work while they would need that. We generally just share the MP3 with them. And so, yeah, I mean, they run hash values on everything. There's a lot. When we get these kind of digital files, there's a lot of like steps that we're doing to keep them alive for much longer. And lots of duplication and things like that. And so in spreadsheets, tracking everything. And so yeah, there's a lot that we do to try to keep it alive. But I mean, Wave is the way to go. I don't know what since I don't create music, I don't know what all the output kind of things that you might get. But if it is kind of proprietary, like, please don't do it. It's gonna burn you eventually. So just make it into a wave. If you can't get the wave, or if you just want to do an MP3, you can, but the wave will be better.
I think that's a great bumper sticker, by the way. Wave is the way.
Well, it's interesting because yesterday we had a panel on, it was like a presentation of a white paper on digital music sharing. And what was an interesting topic that came up was, like, some people call it a wave. I've learned as of yesterday, could also be called a WAV, which I had no idea. But they were saying that what's interesting about waves is that they're notoriously bad for preserving or transferring metadata. Is that
Metadata,
true?
yeah, right.
Yeah. And so that's kind of this interesting, like, I see I don't know if it's a conflict because I'm not smart enough, but it is an interesting thing to note that, like, the file format that I'm most often told to keep as like the best one is also the one that maybe doesn't have the who mixed it, who engineered it, who played drums, who, what year was it, it's the album cover, etc. So I don't know.
I was involved last year in a small project that it's a wizard, and what the wizard does is, before you upload anything, it will ask you for your master file and some basic additional metadata, and it will generate like a unique identifier or unique certificate, and you can share that certificate on a publicly available repository for lookups. So the only thing you have to do is keep a copy of that original master file without altering it. Do not open, do not save it again, because then because the original file is hashed, so we'll get a unique identifier for the file. And then you have also some proof of evidence in any like copyright claim or copyright infringement or whatever. But then you can do something offline yourself, like the hard drives that Nori discussed. But you can share the information, the metadata, on a publicly available repository, so that people can do reverse lookups or build an API to connect all these data sets, so to find what else did he write, or is he on Discogs or those kind of things. So I'll share that link, but that was called Take Note. And that might be a good idea in general. Doesn't have to be Take Note, can be any. This is, by the way, open source. So if somebody wants to just take the source code and just implement it in their own platform or archive or whatever, they can. But that could be fun, to actually have a combination between hard drives at home with your own files, then maybe upload the MP3 and the WAV file to the platform of your choice, and also have the metadata somewhere stored for eternity, so that people can always like do reverse lookups for the upcoming whatever years. And then the only thing you have to promise is to make sure that your hard drives are not stolen or lost. Or
yeah, fingers crossed.
You could put one in a bank savings deposit, or like one of those little bank boxes.
There you go.
You want to make sure that you put it someplace kind of located high, especially if you might be prone to flooding. Don't put it next to a window where water could come in and destroy it. A hard drive is not like the end all be all, but just know, you can also use like a cloud solution in addition to your hard drive, but just having some different options where you've saved things is really important, but then being consistent in the way that you've named those files and everything. And I was seeing a lot of embedding metadata into audio is difficult. It's not doing like batch kind of that work is hard. And I was on a project where we did a lot of that, and someone worked, a metadata coordinator at the library kind of helped me set up some different ways to do that. And honestly, we kind of gave it up because we create a lot of information about it in what are called our inventories, our finding aids. And it was one of those that was slowing us down. And so at some point we have to try to move a little faster. So we didn't, but we do retain as much information as we can. And so, yeah, I will say in the wave at work here, it was a long process to try to figure out what were the best specifications. And it is actually, it's kind of easy. I think it was considered here pretty easy for audio. Video, oh my gosh, video is a beast. So it can be so many different ways. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Well, here's a little reality check for you. I love all this talk about embedding metadata in digital audio files. I'm still trying to find out what's the artist name, what's the album name when I'm dealing with this stuff. So I'm just happy if you give me a WAV file that has the song title in some sort of digestible form. So my bar is low, but my standards are high. And I'm just grateful when someone sends me WAV files and I know what the sample rate is, and I know what the bit depth is, and I know who the artist is, and I know, some context for the album. I did drop a link in the chat to BWF MetaEdit, which is an awesome open source tool where you can embed metadata. I often use it to embed ISRC codes in my WAV files.
Yeah, and one that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's probably never used for, I'm not sure if it's used for archives, but I see it a lot for collecting societies and the streaming music services. They use audio fingerprinting technology. So they actually, Shazam and SoundHound and those kind of technologies where they actually take a file, run it through a system, and see if in the shadow database they have all the metadata already available. If not, then they add that metadata based on the information that was sent by the label or the aggregator or anybody else doing that. That actually is a great resource, because nowadays we also see that a lot of these lookups for example, for copyrights or royalties, that people still are in a database typing in the name of the composer or the title of the song. But if it's a generic composer name and the song is called I Love You, then we know one thing for sure: we'll never find the right version of that specific song, and it might be a completely different version. So if you have that audio fingerprint and you can actually run like an MP3 sample of 20 seconds, it will within 5 seconds recognize the file and say you probably mean that author, performing artist, ISRC code, ISWC code, Bowie, all ISNI numbers, all the numbers that are associated to that specific recording. So I think that there's a nice job ahead of us as well. And I haven't chatted with archives and curators enough to see if that's something that they would love to do, to actually have an offline Shazam machine to actually do that and have a shadow database with audio files or something. That could be a nice add-on service. I would be willing to pay for that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Maybe a business model in here. Yeah.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're approaching the hour and we've had a very lively chat. So if everyone's okay with it, I'd like to just maybe quick fire some of the comments and questions before we wrap up. One was a comment more than a question, but I think it does bring up a question. I wonder if alternative to artists, gatekeepers gauging whether something is worth preserving is to think about preservation not as something to do because of the piece's value today, but instead to keep alive the possibility the piece could be valuable in the future. I believe this is especially important for independent artists to consider for their own archiving purposes. I think we talked about that with, the reissue labels, the people, documentaries, etc. But I also think there's something that Nori had brought up in a conversation we had previous to this of sometimes we have to go back and reclassify the things that maybe we considered important for a reason or were part of a canon for a certain reason, and go back and reclassify some things that were maybe like in the corner that with modern eyes are actually quite important. So I thought maybe if you wanted to bring that conversation up a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to recall what I might have been speaking about, but I think just like I guess some archives that I have done interviews with, and the ones I've created, or the ones I created, kind of this idea of thinking about a scene, and all this group of people who just create this thing that sometimes burns bright for a while, sometimes burns out quickly, but that there are all these bits and pieces of people who are part of it. And, some of those people may not be popular at the time, at the moment. So for example, Lucinda Williams really got her start here in Houston. And it wasn't until a couple decades later, a decade and a half, couple decades later, that she really started to make a mark, and people, were actively enjoying her music. And so, if you find those kind of older recordings, people might be very interested in that. It's also just kind of the smaller artists. I mean, they're all part of, as I think I've said before, telling that overall kind of story. And that, doing interviews with those people, you can realize how they're able to speak to tell you about other people in the scene and give you this kind of larger view of how things, in a sense, went down. And that someone like Lucinda Williams, someone told me that they thought that she was just horrible singing over there in the corner, and then felt really bad later on. And so, it's just, there are ways that thinking about music as, how all these things can kind of occur, it's all interthreaded. Yeah, it's all web. So,
yeah,
I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think so. This is more of a technical question. I'm not sure if it'd be better for Jessica or Hessel, but it's a bit of a long one. Regarding metadata / content, in my recording, I play guitars, other acoustics like mandolin and bass guitars, but I rely on VSTs in my Cubase Pro, like in their digital audio workflow. I forget what it stands for. So regarding the strings, orchestral instruments, drums, including loops, how would I record that information if I put the music out there? Would I claim this as my work, especially when it comes to copyright for the future? So I guess it's a question around copyright when you're using loops or, the kind of like virtual instruments within the DAWs.
Go ahead.
we touch a little bit on this, but I think if you can, and that's something I will tell you, like a little, it's almost like a monetization model nowadays, but people are super interested not just in the actual end result, so the recording, but if you have the stems, for example, so if that comes out of your workstation, save them as separate files and make sure that they are in the right folders, as Jessica was explaining, because there will be somebody who is interested in the acoustic version or like the instrumental version and not the one with the singing, or they might like the stuff that you did on drums, but they might not like the part where you actually worked with your guitar. So save as much as possible as separate files. The standards that the commercial software suites are using, if those standards are around in 10 or 20 years time, yeah, probably, and they will have like a better version or a new version. I'm not sure if the old version can be loaded into a new workstation and works again. So maybe that's where we can relate to what Nori said, like, save them as WAV files, but like all the stems differently. I think that's what I can add to this discussion. Jessica?
I agree. Save the stems, print the stems with the plugins baked in, because plugins aren't going to last. They're going to, become obsolete in their own ways. That's kind of everything that Hessel just said. Save the stems. That helps you when you perhaps want to get a licensing deal and you need that instrumental. And that's it.
Yeah, and I think also we had a panel on AI in music creation, like to make music creation more accessible, and also like just the creative side of working with AI. And I think this is kind of related to the question of like copyright and loop usage, but something that came out of that was, if you're using loops or using the virtual instruments or whatever, like those kind of loops, as long as you're using it within a larger composition, you're okay. But if the main music you're producing is that loop, like if you just take the loop and do it 20 times in a row and then release that as a song, that's where you cannot claim copyright. That was my understanding from the panel. So I don't know if that's an additional.
That's an additional panel.
So make sure you like put it up an octave and then down an octave so your creative side's in there or something. There is a question that I don't know if we can answer, and it might be a whole other panel, but in case someone has some brilliant thought or wants to shut it down or open it up, there was a question of how could the metaverse change and improve this process? Does anyone want to say anything on that, or do you just want to say that's a can of worms?
I would like to respond, because I'm old enough to remember the days of Second Life. That was still around. Nobody was calling that a metaverse, by the way. But I think, and I see the same thing with NFTs at the moment. Like, there's a whole discussion about how to make money with other people's copyright, or all kinds of things going wrong there. I think storing stuff in the metaverse is a really bad idea. Reusing content in the metaverse or in NFTs or anything that will be thrown at us in the upcoming 5 to 10 years is not a problem, as long as you have done your homework. So back to that artist, making sure that we know who you are, that we know where to find all the metadata and the files separately. And then it's as simple as writing down a basic contract between you and the person who wants to use it. So just, quick example, we're now launching music for people so that they can use that music to sync with their NFT project. So the receiving party, the customer, creates NFTs, but they need music that is actually licensable and ready to go for an NFT that might go on sale on OpenSea or any of these NFT platforms out there. Which means that if you do that, you have to make sure that you as an artist have done your homework, because otherwise, with those loops you were just referring to, comes down to that loop wasn't yours, and then it ends up in your music, which isn't yours anymore, which ends up in the NFT, which can't be sold because it isn't yours anymore. So that's the part where I would say, like, metaverse, NFT, or any new container that is thrown at us. Make sure that you have the basics in place, and that's also why this discussion is super useful. Same with context, by the way, because what Nori was saying about all these, curators and archivists writing a specific text with the stuff that they preserve has to be seen in a specific time era. So things that was archived 50 years ago, if we read the context again, might be tricky to just open up the floor and say, like, here you go again, because we might be offended. Similar to the discussion that Mark had yesterday in the panel about the term white paper, that he received a note from Canada saying to not use the term white paper because that has a different annotation in Canada than it has in most of the parts of the world.
Well, and tech, like in the mastering world, like literally the terms slave and master, I know is something
it's
a
a
lot of people are talking about, right?
big discussion on GitHub.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't use them anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The language has been updated to reflect current times, and
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's it's kind of a natural conclusion to this conversation, which is like what you're saying, Hessel, is if you do the work now of naming your stuff and preserving your archive in the best way possible right now, that no matter how the ecosystem changes, like whether streaming platforms change or this metaverse idea takes hold or doesn't take hold, that like ultimately the important thing is what you do right now. And the future can look back and improve on things and whatever, but it starts right here. So I kind of think that makes sense as a natural conclusion to this conversation. But before we go, I would love, because we kind of went through them really quick, is just to go one by one with some final thoughts and most importantly, just like reiterating your practical best practice advice for musicians who are looking to preserve their work. Did we want to go Jessica first, maybe?
Sure. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Someone already figured out best practices. You just need to find them and follow them and implement them into your life in a way that works for you. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you're naming your files consistently, that's better than not. You don't have to think of yourself as an archivist, because that's for people like Nori who have studied that and do that professionally. Last hot tip, I always name my work hard drives with the year that they go into service, because hard drives are much more likely to fail once they hit that 5-year mark, like exponentially, right? So I'm working on Jessica 2020 right now. And I know that in a year or two, all of that data is going to get migrated to a new hard drive. This one's going on the shelf to get fired up every couple of years and serve as a backup. So it's my last tip for you today.
Nori, did you want to hit us with some insight?
I think that everything that Jessica just mentioned is exactly I was thinking, I'll say something about a hard drive, but she said it for me. And so, yeah, I think just, thinking, I guess the one thing I could add is thinking about duplication or triplicate of things. And yeah, just being consistent, because I think that's just enough for future you or other people, loved ones, etc., who might be going through your things, because it happens, right? That they can make sense of it.
And Hessel?
Yeah, on top of all of this, I would say for the artists, like, it's time to take back control. Like Jessica was in the beginning saying about the former role of the music labels and all the other ones who had people in place to do this all for you. Now is really the time to do it yourself, or do it together with organizations who are open and transparent about what they can and cannot do for you. I think that's an important lesson as well. Like everybody is saying, like, choose an aggregator and they will get all your music on all these streaming platforms. Just ask the question, like, and what's the result of having all my music on all these platforms? If your idea was to make a bit of money to pay for your rent, that might not be the best way forward. So take back control. It's your content. You are in control of, and you know best with who you recorded, who was your engineer, what was the setting, which instruments you were using, and try to capture that information at that moment, because the next day you will forget about it. And I've seen too many examples of people jamming together and coming up with this great recording, and then I asked them 2 months later, like, who are actually in the recording studio with you? They have no idea. So take back control, do as much as possible yourself, use open standards all the way you can, because they preserve well, the Creative Commons or the open licensing models or open standards in general. And then to copy what Nori said about Wave, like, go for Wave. Wave is the way. I like that one.
And I just add that, like, anyone at home, I just implore you to believe that your work is worth preserving in some way. There's nerds like me who have 250 screen printed posters under their bed and still have their CD collection and still have their records and care about, you know, the band that maybe 30 people went to see 10 years ago. And, you know, I like to know, I know that I'm not the only one, or I need to believe that I'm not the only one. So please believe in your own work. I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. I just want to thank everyone for their insights. It was amazing. I hope everyone got some practical info out of this thing. And I'd just like to remind everyone too that tonight is our very last panel in 5 hours, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, Enacting Change, where we'll take kind of the weeks-long look at the digital music landscape, the overall music industry, all of the myriad issues that need changing, and talk about how we can be thoughtful in actually enacting any sort of change and improving things. So just thank you all so much for taking your time and sharing your expertise. And I hope people enjoyed their time.